Between the end of the filming of the Rum Diary and the press junket, did you and Miss Heard communicate at any time in between?
I don't remember. I remember that there was a white dress that she really was infatuated with, that she really loved this dress that she wore in the film. And so I went to Colleen Atwood, the costume designer, and to Bruce, and I said, do you think we can snag this white dress and send it to Amber, you know, after she'd wrapped, because she loved the thing. I remember talking to her, I think, then, but briefly.
What did you like about Miss Heard when you first started your romantic relationship?
She seemed to be the she seemed to be the perfect partner, in a sense, in my head and for me, because she, as I said, she seemed to be very knowledgeable about old obscure blues music that I listened to and really liked. She was literate. She was sweet, funny, nice, all those things, you know. And she was, and from the beginning of our relationship at that time, for a good year and a half, she was wonderful. And then things just started to change, or things started to reveal themselves. That's, I think, is a better way to put it.
You mentioned earlier in your testimony that Miss Heard would take off your boots when you would get home from work. What other types of behaviors did you observe in Miss Heard early in the relationship?
Little things that you would kind of, it would just, you'd question in the back of your mind, you know, if she wanted to go to bed, I'd say, oh, well, I can't sleep, you know, right now. And rather than go and just lay in a bed and stare at the ceiling, I would say, you know, I'll be either watching TV or hanging out. And that was just not acceptable. Just not acceptable. It would stir up some rather unusual reactions from her. I didn't understand why I, as a 50-something-year-old man, was not allowed to go to sleep when I wanted to, as opposed to when she wanted to. It started out with little things like that. And again, they just, they just, I suppose like anything, if they're allowed to continue, then they are allowed to grow. They're allowed to blossom into whatever they're going to become.
What were you and Miss Heard's nicknames for each other?
I called her Slim.
Why is that?
I called her Slim because of the film that I had given her to watch, like in terms of stillness, was Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart. And I called her Slim, and she called me Steve, which was Lauren Bacall's and Humphrey Bogart's nicknames for each other in the film. That was their names in the film. And it you know, it wasn't lost on me the fact that there was an age difference, and that my God, when Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall, that's when they met on that film. He was 45 years old and she was 19, and they stayed together until, well, for many years, until Bogart passed away. So, yeah, there was a kind of a joke, not joke, but just, yeah, I acknowledge the fact that I was the old craggy bogey and she was this beautiful creature, just this stunning creature.
When did you first meet Miss Heard's parents?
I first met Miss Heard's parents when they had come out to Los Angeles, I believe, and yeah, and I feel like that I met them. I think they came to my place, to my studio, and they were two completely opposite end of the spectrum people. Paige was she was an angel. She was an angel, and I loved her very much. I loved her instantly, and we had a very good relationship. Her father, David, was the opposite end of that. He was this outrageous kind of, almost like a cartoon cowboy, you know. And he was, the initial thought, I mean, my initial kind of definition for David would have been rascally, like a rascal, you know. But I loved, I mean, I grew to love them both very much, as well as her sister Whitney. And yes, it felt like I had been welcomed into some sort of family. I had been accepted into this family, and those relationships stayed solid until just a bit after we'd separated.
How often did you spend time with Miss Heard's parents during your relationship with Miss Heard?
Quite a lot. Whether I used to have a boat, and we would take her parents, her family, and we'd go sail the boat and, you know, drop anchor at the island, and we would spend a week, 2 weeks, whatever, on the boat, on the island. Also, they would come to Los Angeles quite a bit. We also would go to Austin here and there to see them, visit them. Every year we would, on their anniversary, I had a friend of mine who had a restaurant in Austin, like a very good restaurant in Austin, and I'd call him up and basically set it up so that every year on their anniversary they could just go there, and they'd be taken care of, and there would be no bill, so they could just celebrate. And I think one of the things we did was, yes, we would try to order them car so that they could drink. No, I was very fond of them, very fond of them.
Now, you mentioned Miss Heard's sister, Whitney. When did you first meet Whitney?
I don't remember exactly when I met Whitney the first time, but I felt when I first met Whitney, there was something in what I saw of Whitney that was much less confident than Amber, much more revealing of insecurities.
Objection, Your Honor, just foundation. What he saw in Whitney.
I think if you could answer the question.
Okay.
You want to ask the question again? That's fine.
We can move on.
Okay, that's fine.
How would you describe your relationship with Whitney?
Great. I mean, fantastic. I called her sis. I loved her, you know. I had always felt something. I'd always felt like Whitney had missed out on something.
Same objection.
All right.
We can move on.
Okay, thank you.
Where was Whitney living when you and Miss Heard first started your relationship?
She was living with her then boyfriend, Sean Krajewski.
Was this in the same? Where was Miss Heard living when you first started your relationship?
Miss Heard had informed me that she just moved to a new place on Orange Avenue.
What city is that in?
Los Angeles, sorry, yeah.
And was Whitney also living in Los Angeles?
Whitney was living in Los Angeles, yes, with Sean Krajewski and, yeah.
So how often would you see Whitney when you and Miss Heard were in a relationship?
Oh, a lot. Whitney would come over all the time with her boyfriend for dinners and such. Miss Heard always liked having people over, you know, for dinner parties and social kind of events at her place.
Have you ever done any drugs with Whitney?
Yes.
How often would you do that?
With Whitney,
Yes, with Whitney.
maybe three times, maybe twice, 3 times.
Did there come a time when Whitney moved into the penthouses that you owned at the Eastern Columbia building?
Yes.
And when was that?
I don't remember exactly when it was, but I do remember that it was after Rocky Pennington and yes, I believe Josh Drew was there already as well. Whitney, I can't remember why she needed a place, but she needed a place, so we gave her penthouse 4 to live in.
And how long did she live there for?
Oh boy, on and off for, I suppose, a couple of years.
And how much rent did you charge her? Now, you said you did drugs a couple times with Whitney. What drugs were you doing with Whitney?
Whitney and I had done a line or two of cocaine together.
When did you start getting introduced to Miss Heard's friends after you started your relationship with her?
Almost immediately. Well, in fact, immediately, yeah. Immediately. I was introduced to the whole gang, you know. Rocky, Io, Brittany Eustace, Whitney, certainly. Who else? That's all that comes to mind at the moment.
No, you mentioned Rocky. Who is that specifically?
Raquel Pennington. It was Miss Heard's good friend from youth, I suppose.
And I think you mentioned Brittany Eustace as well. Who was that?
Brittany Eustace was just one of the gals, you know. She was one of the gals, and she was quite bubbly and funny and real sweet girl, southern girl. I haven't seen her in. I think that something went sideways between Brittany Eustace and the girls because she suddenly just disappeared from the group.
And when was that?
We were probably a year and a half or maybe 2 years into the relationship, 3 years maybe.
And I believe you mentioned someone named Io. Who is that?
Io Tillett Wright was a friend of Ms. Heard's from New York City who was who had identified as she was born a female, if that's the right terminology these days, born a female, but she was she had chosen at a very young age she had decided that she was a male, and she identified as a male. And Io seemed to be, again, she was very intelligent, very literate, kind of a go-get-em kind of activist type. And she was writing a book, I remember. She was writing a book, Io, or he was writing a book, rather. And I had a house on one of my, on Sweetser, one of the houses there was empty. And it was in fact a house that I'd set up to write in. And when she had no place to stay or go, whatever, I called her over and I showed her the house, you know, where the desk was and all the things. And so I said, write your book, you know, write your book here. So she did.
Did Io end up living in that house or just working there?
No, Io ended up, no, she ended up living in the house for somewhere in the neighborhood of a year, I guess. Somewhere about a year.
And how much rent did you charge to Io?
Nothing.
And did there also come a time when Rocky moved into the penthouses at the Eastern Columbia building?
Rocky moved into penthouse 2.
And do you recall when that was?
Oh, no, Penthouse 1, sorry. Penthouse 1. That was not long after Ms. Heard and I started to begin to dress that place up as our residence. So it wasn't very long after that at all that Rocky came. I had already had my friend Isaac, who you've met, Isaac Baruch, the painter. I had already given him a penthouse to stay and live in and paint in, because he'd just come back from Florida, and his mom had passed away, and I think he had about $3 in his pocket. So I gave him the penthouse and asked him if he had enough paint, and so he lived there.
Why did Rocky move into the penthouses?
Objection, foundation.
I'll overrule foundation.
And hearsay. The question potentially calls for hearsay.
I'll overrule that for the moment. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Depp.
Why did, sorry, what was it again?
Why did Rocky end up moving into the penthouses?
Well, she ended up moving into the penthouses. I don't recall. I believe it was something to do with just not having a place. And Amber had asked if I would be okay with, Rocky moving in. And I said, of course. The penthouse is empty. I wasn't in the, I wasn't going to be renting them out necessarily anyway. They were for friends to come and stay. Penthouse 4, in fact, was initially planned out for my sister Christy to have an escape from her 3,000 grandchildren and the amount of workload that she had taken on at the company.
How long did Miss Pennington end up staying in the penthouses?
Longer than I did.
And how much rent did you charge to Miss Pennington?
Nothing.
Did anyone live with Miss Pennington in the penthouses?
Yes, her fiance or boyfriend and fiance Josh Drew. And then at a certain point, I learned that there was another female living there. I wasn't sure who that was. I didn't know who that was. There were 2 bedrooms, and so she had invited a friend to move in. But I met that person very briefly a while after they'd already been living there.
Are you at a good breaking point?
I think
just
this
wanna
is a
make sure.
good
Okay,
stopping point.
That's fine. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is 5 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and break for the evening. Again, do not discuss the case with anybody and don't do any outside research, okay? And we'll see you in the morning at 10 a.m., all right? Thank you. You're excused for the day. Thank you. All right. And again, sir, since you're in the middle of your testimony, do not discuss your testimony with anybody to include your attorneys this evening, okay? All right, you can stand down if you'd like. Okay, thank you. All right, is there any other matters for this evening? Sure.